Haberfield, and this artwork traces the story of the name Haberfield. And Haberfield is my father's middle name. So just not long before Steve contacted me, my aunt had sent me this history of the name Haberfield. And it's a fantastic story, and I thought the easiest way for me to do this was just pull out a few quotes from the story. It's really based around the passage of my great-grandfather on my father's side, and my great-grandfather's wife's legendary story that she brought with her to Australia. So it's about the passage of that side of the family. And so I'm just going to try and just take some of the images from the sails and do it that way. So we're going to start with this image, and that's a gypsy caravan. So in the early 1800s, somewhere in England, a little girl is abducted by gypsies. She remains with the gypsies for many years until when she is about 8 or 9 years old, and the gypsy caravan of which she is part is travelling through the county of Somersetshire. She is seen and rescued. And then many years later, Sir John Haberfield heard her singing in the choir and was determined to meet her. He fell in love with her, married her, and she became Lady Sarah Jane Haberfield. The extraordinary story of the little girl who was rescued from gypsies, adopted into the Brooke family, and entered a fairy story with her marriage to Sir John Haberfield has been almost a legend in the Brooke family, and from the Brooke family through Florence to the Stanton family. So this is a bit of a myth in our family, you know, this way the girl was rescued and had a fairy tale life. So Florence married my great-grandfather, and how she came to be in Australia is revealed through her father's funeral. So this, the next image is actually not quite related to my great-grandfather, but his wife's family. And we're going to go to the ball and chain here. So Florence's father, at the age of 15, ran away to sea rather than follow in his stern father's footsteps. He was a bank manager and apparently a very difficult man. So, as my aunt said, Henry stowed away, this is 15, on a ship to the River Severn. He had no idea where this ship was headed, neither apparently did he care. He was young and foolish. The ship headed out to sea with Henry on board. He could not, of course, remain a stowaway, and once discovered was forced to join the crew. But what Henry did not realise until the ship on which he had stowed away was well out to sea was that he had stowed away on and was now a member of the crew of a slave trader plying its trade between Africa and America. So with adventure on his mind, young Henry had embarked on rather more of an adventure than he anticipated. So, you know, talk about skeletons in the closet, well, it doesn't get worse than that. So, he was forced to continue with the crew, and this is a longboat here, so I'll just talk about this image here. The men beached the longboat, but suddenly found themselves surrounded by angry tribesmen, these aren't my words, obviously intent on killing them. The crew, working frantically, managed to get their boat back into the water and rowing frantically reached the safety of their ship, escaping the tribesmen who were close behind them. But the exertion affected Henry's heart, and he would die of heart failure at a relatively young age. Anyway, he did actually end up coming out to Australia. When the ship once more docked in England, Henry left the ship, went back home. He did work in the bank and learned accountancy, but the pull of the sea and adventure was too much. Henry signed on as first mate on a clipper sailing to the colony of New South Wales. On arriving in Sydney, however, he decided to stay. He jumped ship and hid in Sutton Forest until the ship had left Sydney on the return voyage to England. He marries and he has 3 children, Florence being the second. So she would be my great-great-grandmother. So that's the passage of her family. And then we're going to move to the falling baby here. That's a falling baby in that image. No, sorry, I've got ahead of myself. This one here. So now we're talking about my great-grandfather and how he came to be in Australia. So his name was Patrick Stanton, and he was born in Ireland, Roscommon Island, in 1842. And so, and Patrick enters our story in 1860 when he turns 18 and joins the constabulary. Ireland was, of course, under the control of the English, and the English decided they needed a local constabulary to help keep the peace in what they considered the lawless country of Ireland. Whether joining voluntarily or not, each recruit had to swear an oath of allegiance, and part of this oath was that they must not marry until the age of 21. To break this oath would be a hanging offence, and this is where Patrick got himself into serious trouble. He married Maria Hill, and in 1862 a child was born, Richard, who's my great-grandfather. I think that's right, yeah. Yeah. So this is Richard here, my great-grandfather. And the story goes that they did reach the coast safely and were able to get passage on a windjammer. This is the sails of the windjammer, about to set sail for the colony of New South Wales. The story goes that the ship was so close to sailing and that Patrick feared the English were so close to finding him that he and Maria ran up the gangplank, dropped the baby and broke his legs. The story also goes that on the long and difficult voyage, the baby got rickets. Whether or not these stories are true, Richard survived the trauma and he was a sturdy little boy. So, yeah. Then we're going to move along to this image here. So what I did is I just pulled images out of the stories from my history and worked with that. So, as the story goes, Richard was very good looking and liked the ladies and is described as having Irish colouring, dark brown hair, blue eyes and having a good tenor voice. Not being motivated in any particular direction, he travelled through New South Wales singing in the amateur show, the Glee Club. So, you know, it's just a bit of a dandy for a while there. And then, however, further on, he inherited the family business, which was based in Summerhill, a real estate agency that Patrick had set up. And he became a managing director of a cattle station in Queensland. He was one of the values to the city council, becomes advisor to the state, and blah, 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 blah. And also worked with the railways and municipal bodies on development and resumption schemes. So he became very active actually later in life. And we're just going to move to this kookaburra and a waratah. For those who don't know, you know, the Australian bird, the kookaburra that we're quite well known for, and the waratah is an Australian flower. And the project of Richard's that is of a special interest to us for this story is his vision of creating a model garden suburb. Many of the original suburbs of Sydney were Victorian-style terraces, often built in tight clusters on narrow streets with narrow back lanes as access for nightclubs. By the late 1800s, it had become obvious that these suburbs had deteriorated into slum areas, overcrowded, infested with rats and diseases. So he had this vision of creating a better model of living, and he actually travelled to America and looked at how they did things over there. In 1900, he commenced a housing development. The houses had lead-like windows depicting Australian native plants, birds and animals. This was at a time when the European population of the country was starting to show a keen interest in the native flora and fauna. In the 1990s, a group of residents of this suburb formed an association and applied for and were granted heritage listing for their suburb. And what did Richard call his model garden suburb? Haberfield. So it's kind of this interweaving of two stories, this mythic story of a girl being abducted by gypsies but being rescued and marrying the mayor and having, you know, this wonderful fairy tale life, which was held quite dearly by Florence's family. And then this, on the Stanton side, their passage out here and his, you know, idea of creating a more utopian lifestyle and incorporating the Haberfield name into that. Does that make any sense whatsoever? It's quite an involved and long history, and there's a lot of detail, and that's just a few of the more dramatic events. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think knowing that extra information
Yeah.
enriches the story enormously.
Yeah.
It's fabulously interesting. I would like to see some sort of additional information accessible if people want to.
Yeah, I did actually realise there was maybe have the quotes for that, but I just got a bit involved in the hanging. But I was thinking to have a map on the wall with the sales,
exactly,
and next to the sales the quote that related.
Because I think you need that extra bit to work it out.
Yeah.
And whether it's true or not, whether it's legend or not, it's a fabulous adventure, and I think that's lacking. I think it would really help.
What I found was quite interesting was that just through this one family, how all the emblems kind of say so much about a much broader history. You know, it seems kind of bigger than this one family. Yeah.
I just want to, sorry,
Yeah.
to cut you off, but I just want to know what the process of making the work, the process of doing something physical with these legends, what that actually, how that was all for yourself.
Well, the one thing was I had this story, so I had the story to work with, and the images did come to me in the windjammer and the sail. So I thought to use the sails of the windjammer as my canvas, and then emblazon on the images that actually really told the story, you know, the key elements in the story. I was 7 months pregnant and I had a 1.5-year-old, and it was the build-up, and I was crawling around on the floor cutting out every Sunday. I only had 2 hours every Sunday to make, and I get on the floor fully pregnant and cutting, sewing and cutting, and I actually was doing it right up until I had to go on the plane. So it was quite...
Should be another sale.
Yeah, like that. Another sail at the end.
I'm missing one for the windjammer.
No, for you, for the pregnant.
Oh, yeah.
Part of it.
Did I miss the sale?
Yeah. How many sales are there on a windjammer?
That's a good question. I didn't bring the picture.
I'm just wondering if this represents...
I think I know this is pretty right.
Is it?
I think there's more. No, there's more. You know, they've got the mast going up 3 that way. You know, and they go up that way. It's a bit simplified.
Yeah, it would be interesting. The last
Artistic
one,
glass.
the bit is just because I just got it in my head too. Last one, with you.
But yeah, it wouldn't have been possible in Indonesia without the amazing support that we had over there. It was just fantastic. That was fabulous. In ICAM we had this enormous warehouse space, and I wasn't in a state to go up and down scaffolding, and the support there was just incredible. I had this team of people helping me day in and day out, and it was fantastic. The generosity and the hospitality in Indonesia was wonderful. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Sidra. Yeah. So yeah, that's it. I want to thank Steve for a wonderful opportunity. I really enjoyed this project. It's great. Yeah.